Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Excited to be here with you today. And today we're going to do our very first Ask the Naturopath episode. So in these episodes, which I'm hoping to do once a month-ish, I am going to answer one of the questions that our Natural Super Kids Klub members has asked. And so I am going to handpick these questions based on a few different factors. One, I want to choose questions which I know you will get a lot of value from the answers from, of course. And two, I want to pick questions that will allow us to delve a bit deeper into some of the really important concepts when it comes to kids' health. So our question today comes from our lovely Natural Super Kids Klub member, Amber, and I'm going to read the question out. Amber asks, Miss 4 is on antibiotics for an ear infection. Her behaviour, I think since being on antibiotics, has been hugely emotional. Can this be attributed? Anything I can do to help her? So I think this is a fantastic question and we are going to delve into it now. So there are three likely things that are happening here with Amber's daughter, who is 4. Number one, maybe the infection is actually the thing that is causing her to be emotional and affect her behaviour. This is, a fairly basic concept, I think, but maybe overlooked. So, of course, when our kids are in discomfort, when they're tired, when their body's fatigued because they're fighting an infection in the background, they are much more likely to be grumpy, to have tantrums, to be short-tempered, to have meltdowns. So that is one thing. Now, I'm not sure if this is the case for Amber's daughter because she has noticed since her daughter's been on antibiotics, her behaviour has changed and she's been emotional. But I just wanted to flag this because, this is something that we don't want to overlook. When our kids are unwell, they can be affected in all sorts of different ways in terms of their mood and behaviour. The second thing is that antibiotics affect the good bacteria in a child's gut microbiome. Now, we're going to delve into this in a moment, but this can certainly lead to mood and behavioural challenges. And I think this is a really interesting area to explore. But I do just want to talk about the third point that could be going on here, which is easily overlooked, and that is that children's medication particularly can, and most does, include additives in some form, shape or form. So there could be additives such as colours, such as flavours, such as sweeteners. And this is really apparent when you look at those brightly coloured antibiotic syrups that are prescribed for our children. They definitely contain a range of additives. So it could potentially be the additives in the medication that are leading to some of this these emotional symptoms and behavioural symptoms. In fact, I have a website called FedUp. It's fedup.com.au and it's a great resource for food intolerances and food additives. And on this website, it talks about some of the reactions that can occur from food additives that are found in both food and medications. And I want to just read these out to you and just really to raise awareness and as a point to think about if and when your children are on medication. So some of the reactions or the effects of these food additives for kids can be irritability, restlessness, short fuse, tantrums, ADHD type symptoms, oppositional defiance, difficulty falling asleep, frequent night waking, mood swings, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, inattention, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, and it goes on to list, eczema and skin symptoms, reflux, stomach aches and other digestive symptoms, headaches, migraines, asthma and breathing difficulties. So this is a real, a possibility in terms of a cause for children that might be on medications and be having behavioural or mood challenges. And I will link to that particular article in the show notes for anyone who's interested in exploring this area more. Let's just talk about antibiotics for a moment, because I just want to make it clear that I am definitely not anti-antibiotics. There's no doubt that antibiotics save lives. And in the early 1900s, the top 3 killers of our children were infectious diseases. And I, for one, am very grateful as a mother that I don't have the fear that those mums did back in those early 1900 days. Because nowadays it is relatively rare for a child to die from a common infectious disease. But the introduction of antibiotics has had both positive and negative effects on our children's health. And one of the negative effects of antibiotics is that they are having an effect on our kids' gut bacteria, on their microbiome. And we know that the gut microbiome is a very important part or consideration when it comes to our kids' health. So we know that overuse of antibiotics can have a detrimental effect on the microbiome and reduce the diversity, the number of different species of bacteria within the microbiome. And we know that lack of diversity is linked with all kinds of common childhood conditions that we see today, including eczema and asthma and allergies and autism and ADHD. And of course, these conditions are multifactorial, but we want to, really be aware of this effect that overuse of antibiotics can have on our kids' health. We know that antibiotics are significantly overused. There are over 30 million scripts for antibiotics written in Australia every year. And almost half of Australians are given at least one course of antibiotics per year. And this is contributing to antibiotic resistance, which is described as one of the greatest threats to public health in Australia. There are also many cases where antibiotics are not warranted. Scripts are written for infections that are viral or not clearly a bacterial infection. So, for example, the majority of ear infections are viral in nature, but most doctors will prescribe antibiotics for ear infections without a consideration of whether it's caused by a virus or a bacteria. Antibiotics are also really commonly used through pregnancy, through birth, and through very early childhood. And unfortunately, even one course of antibiotics for kids and babies can be devastating for their immune system. Nearly every child that I see with immune issues or recurrent infections has had either a heavy use of antibiotics overall or exposure to antibiotics when very young. So we want to consider these, but we also know that antibiotics do save lives. So it's important to look at the pros and cons when we're considering whether our child might need antibiotics. Now, I want to go back to the second point that I made in terms of the effect that antibiotics have on the gut microbiome and how this can lead to the mood and behavioural challenges that Amber is talking about in her daughter as potentially one of the things that might be going on. And I just find this area so fascinating. You may have heard about this before, the gut-brain connection. And the gut-brain connection is an area that is attracting a lot of attention and a lot of scientific research. It is very fascinating, and we're only just starting to scratch the surface when it comes to the connection between the gut and the brain. And scientists are now calling the gut the second brain because it has such a big impact on brain health overall, on mood, and on behaviour. So, put simply, the gut brain connection is the fact that the gut and the brain are talking to each other or communicating with each other. So, there's a nerve called the vagus nerve that links the gut to the brain. And if we think about life experiences that we might have had where a particular emotional state has affected our gut in some way. For example, we're really nervous and we feel it in our tummy. We get those butterflies. Or we might be really angry or sad and we feel sick in our stomach because of that. So that is, a really good example of that communication that's happening between our gut and our brain. Our emotions have a direct impact on our gut. But the relationship goes both ways. And it's been found, scientific research has found, that the microbes in our gut can communicate with our brain. And this is thought to affect the production of neurotransmitters or brain chemicals that affect so many different aspects of our kids' health, and mood and behaviour and sleep are really important ones. So brain chemicals such as serotonin and dopamine and GABA are all essential for mental health. And an imbalance in these chemicals is linked to mood and behavioural challenges. So we know that kids with anxiety, with depression, with ADHD, kids that are on the spectrum can often have an imbalance in these brain chemicals. We also know that an imbalance in these brain chemicals is linked to a lower diversity in gut bacteria. So we know that high diversity within our microbiome and our kids' microbiome is important for overall health, but this suggests that it has a specific impact on our kids' mental health and our mental health as well. This is really translatable for both children and adults. So improving the diversity within our children's gut can help to rebalance these brain chemicals and improve their mental health, their mood, their behaviour. And so when we go back to this use of antibiotics, which is affecting negatively this diversity within our gut microbiome, that's exactly what antibiotics are designed to do, to kill bacteria. And of course, this can be life-changing if it's pathogenic bacteria that's causing illness. But it also is that they are also affecting the healthy bacteria within our kids' gut, within our kids' microbiome. And so the overuse of antibiotics can really reduce that diversity within the microbiome. So this is a really important factor. And look, there's not enough research to know, how quickly something like one course of antibiotics could affect our children's mood and behaviour, but it is something that we need to be aware of. And it does seem in certain children, perhaps that have less robust gut health, they already have some gut health imbalance issues, that just one course of antibiotics can definitely, knock that balance over the edge and start to affect their mood and their behaviour in a negative way. So just to recap, in terms of Amber's question, I think the three things that are potentially leading to Miss 4 being more emotional and these behavioural challenges that have been noticed since she started taking the antibiotics. One, it could be the infection itself and the discomfort, the fatigue that is causing. Two, the antibiotics' effect on the gut microbiome. and how that could be leading to the mood and behavioural changes. And number 3, something we don't want to overlook, is the potential additives that are included in the antibiotic medication that could be triggering mood and behavioural changes in children as well. So it's really important whenever we give our kids antibiotics, which are necessary sometimes, that we are replenishing that good bacteria that the antibiotics are reducing in the gut microbiome with a probiotic supplement, a good quality probiotic supplement, and or some fermented foods in the diet as well. I love to use a combination of both, and we really want to make sure we're going for the good quality probiotics, not just the cheapest thing we can find on the pharmacy shelf or in the supermarket. We really want to make sure that we're getting the good stuff in for our kids, particularly after a course of antibiotics. And so I want to just talk about a service that we have available at Natural Super Kids, which is our express consultations, which are designed for exact things like this. So if you're wanting to get a prescription for some good quality supplements and you're wanting to get some professional advice from a naturopath on exactly what you should do for your particular child's situation, if it's just a quick question such as, my child's just been on antibiotics, I want to make sure that we're replenishing their gut health, how can we do that? Then the express consultation is a great option for that. So you get qualified advice and you get access to the high quality practitioner only products. But just make sure you are going for a good quality probiotic and some fermented foods in the diet to help replenish that gut bacteria after any course of antibiotics. It's really important. So let's just finish up with the 3 action steps, or the 3 things that you can do and be aware of from what we've talked about in this episode. So number 1 is only use antibiotics when absolutely necessary. So use your mother's intuition, get a second opinion if you're not sure, talk to a naturopath or another qualified health practitioner if you're wanting a different approach, or to check whether antibiotics, whether there's any alternatives to antibiotics for your child's particular issue at the time. Of course, there's not a lot of time when antibiotics are prescribed. You often want to kind of get onto them as quickly as possible. So, just do consider getting a second opinion if it doesn't feel right for you. So using antibiotics when absolutely necessary and getting a second opinion if you feel that's necessary as well. Number 2 action step is just to be aware of the additives that we discussed. So additives, I think a lot of people are really aware that they're in foods, processed foods, but we also need to make sure that we're aware that there are additives in children's medications as well. So ask your doctor or your pharmacist for a list of the ingredients in a particular medication. And look, food additives and additives that we're talking about that can be contained within medications, some kids will be fine with them. Other kids will be much more sensitive to them. And when I say they'll be fine with them, I'm talking about sort of short-term medication use. The majority of kids are going to cope with that okay. And the medication is probably the benefits are probably going to outweigh any negatives of food additives. But there certainly are some kids that are more sensitive to additives, and the lasting effect of additives in even a short course of medication like antibiotics can definitely be significant. So talk to your GP or your pharmacist about your concerns about these additives and see if there's an alternative that doesn't contain additives if you feel like your child is sensitive to additives. And number 3 is always follow antibiotics with a course of probiotics. And to be more specific, I generally recommend a double dose of probiotics following a course of antibiotics for 2 weeks, and then at least another 2 weeks on just that recommended dose of probiotics. And make sure you're choosing a good quality probiotic. Now, that will change based on, that will depend based on, where you live and your child's particular health concern, your child's particular state of their gut health. So always do think about seeking out professional advice, and the express consult that we offer here at Natural Super Kids, all done online, can be a great option to get these questions answered about your child's health. So I really hope that has been helpful for you today and you've enjoyed today's episode. Let us know if you've got any questions, and all of the links that I have talked about in today's episode are in the show notes. So just head on over to naturalsuperkids.com/podcasts for all of the show notes and links for this episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.